It begins quietly, the kind of quiet that only happens when the air itself has frozen into stillness. The North Atlantic is wrapped in its own breath, and the snow has turned the horizon into something dreamlike and heavy, like a sheet being pulled over the world. The village is nearly invisible now, half buried in white, half asleep beneath a sky the color of pewter. But there is one shape still alive against the storm, a long, low house crouched in the wind, its roof blanketed with turf and snow, its doorway glowing faintly from within like a lantern, half remembered in a dream. Inside, life continues at a slower rhythm. You duck through the narrow door and the air changes immediately. The outside world vanishes behind you, replaced by warmth that isn't exactly comfort, but something stronger, something earned. The smell of smoke and wool and pine tar wraps around you, the thick kind of scent that seems to come not just from the fire but from the walls themselves. The room is dark, the way dark feels in a place built to outlast storms. The fire at the center is small, more ember than flame, yet its glow stretches just far enough to paint the outlines of everything that matters. Faces softened by the light, hands moving slowly over tools, a pot simmering with something that smells faintly of barley and fish. This isn't the bright, cheerful kind of fire you see in paintings. This is a worker's flame, an old ally that doesn't waste energy on showmanship. The Vikings never needed grand fireplaces. They needed survival. Their homes were low and heavy, built with timber frames packed in turf, earth, or stone, layers that trapped warmth and muted the wind. Fireplaces, with their hungry chimneys and exposed bricks, would have been a luxury of later centuries, a kind of architectural decoration. Here, in this northern world, every shape had a purpose. Every corner was a calculation against frost. You stand for a moment, feeling the way the air moves. It's not still. It circulates in a rhythm you can almost sense, rising warm from the hearth, cooling as it meets the roof beams, drifting down again in lazy curls. Smoke slides toward a small vent in the ceiling, but not all of it escapes. Some hangs in the air like a slow ghost, softening the light and scenting every breath. The beams above are blackened with years of this same smoke, polished by centuries of repetition. And yet, this was the secret. The smoke, irritating as it was, helped preserve the wood from insects and moisture, sealing the house in its own strange protection. You notice the walls next, thick, breathing walls that are more than barriers. You can almost feel their patience. Beneath the turf, frozen roots and soil hold tight to heat from the hearth, releasing it back through the night like a living thing. It is easy to imagine that the house itself has lungs, slow, ancient lungs that exhale warmth long after the fire begins to fade. Along the sides, wooden benches double as beds. Thick piles of straw and wool have been arranged carefully, not for decoration but for efficiency. Families will sleep there shoulder to shoulder, under the same firs that once walked the northern forests. You can picture it later, the storm raging outside and inside, a line of people breathing in quiet synchronization, each body lending its warmth to the next. Even the animals have a place in this small ecosystem. A sheep rustles softly near the back wall, and a cow shifts its weight with a sleepy snort. Their heat is part of the calculation. It might seem strange to modern eyes, but here warmth is a shared resource, and survival doesn't bother with etiquette. Somewhere, a woman hums, not a song with words, just a rhythm that matches the crackle of the fire. It fills the room like a spell of endurance, and you begin to feel what she already knows, that comfort is not the absence of cold, but the knowledge that it cannot reach you yet. And as the storm thickens outside, you find yourself listening less to the wind and more to the breathing of the house, the small adjustments of wood and turf, the sound of snow piling higher above the roof. The longhouse does not fight the weather. It absorbs it, and that is why it lasts. Tonight, you are going to learn how people once slept through blizzards without fireplaces, without chimneys, and without fear, by building not just homes but harmony with the storm itself. By now, the storm is no longer a sound. It is a presence. It presses on the roof, sighing against the beams, trying every seam the way cold always does. patient and merciless. Inside, though, the longhouse has begun to settle into its night rhythm. The light has dimmed to that deep orange where everything looks half-dreamed. The air is thick with the quiet steam of bodies and stew, with the smoky breath of survival. You sit near the hearth as the family prepares for sleep, and you begin to see the system behind their calm. The fire is not left to blaze. It is managed like a heartbeat. Coals are raked into a tight, glowing circle, a few slow-burning logs laid on top, and ash pushed gently over the edges to keep the heat smouldering until dawn. Around it, stones that have sat all evening near the flames are lifted with tongs and wrapped in scraps of wool or leather. These will be carried to the sleeping platforms, tucked among the straw to radiate warmth through the night. The glow fades, but the heat lingers, hidden in stone and skin and breath. The bedding areas are simple ledges built into the walls, but in this cold world they become something almost sacred. A woman spreads a fresh layer of straw, then furs thick enough to block the chill from the timber beneath. Woolen blankets go on top, heavy and smelling faintly of sheep oil, lanolin, nature's own insulation. One by one, people climb onto the benches, children first, sliding close together until they look like a single living bundle. There are no private rooms here, no doors to close, no modest separations. Warmth is communal, and survival is shared. You notice how carefully they position themselves. The youngest sleep in the middle, the strongest on the outside where the drafts creep in. Feet toward the center, heads toward the wall. The heat from the hearth reaches the legs first, and the walls, packed with turf and earth, release their stored warmth slowly across the hours. The animals breathe quietly at the far end, their steady exhalations adding just enough heat to shift the balance between comfort and frost. It is an unspoken cooperation, ancient and exact. Someone adjusts a hide over the door, sealing the last sliver of night air. The room darkens further until the only light comes from the soft pulse of coals, flickering across the rafters like a tired star. Smoke drifts lazily, thin and silver. The air is warmest close to the floor now, so people curl low, pulling furs over their heads, making a little tent of their own breath. You can hear the difference in sound. Outside, the storm snarls. Inside, it's a low choir of slow breathing, the shuffling of straw, the occasional sigh of timber. There is a kind of wisdom here that modern comfort has forgotten. Warmth is not something you chase, it's something you keep by moving less, by learning your house as if it were a second body. The longhouse holds its heat, like lungs hold air, exhaling gently, keeping every spark alive. The last voice fades, and the hall falls into the deep quiet that comes before real sleep. You can almost feel the temperature balancing itself, the cold pressing down from the roof, the warmth rising from below, meeting somewhere in the middle like two old friends who agree not to fight tonight. Outside, snow keeps falling, soundless and endless. Inside, the Vikings dream in smoke and wool and darkness, the kind of sleep that only exists when the world could kill you and somehow doesn't. When morning finally comes, it does not announce itself with light. It arrives as a slow grey seep through the smoke hole, a dim thickening in the air, the difference between night and almost day. The longhouse wakes one breath at a time. A stir of movement beneath the furs, the creak of straw, the soft grunt of someone stretching muscles that have slept curled too long against the cold. The fire is mostly gone now, a heart of dull red coals half hidden under ash. Yet the room is not frozen. The walls, fat with yesterday's heat, still exhale a ghost of warmth. You can smell it in the air. Smoke, wool, earth, and a faint sweetness of thawing frost. One of the women is already up, hair loose and dark with humidity, kneeling by the hearth. She pushes aside the ash with a stick, revealing a thread of living ember, and feeds it a handful of dry moss and birch bark. A tiny breath of flame blooms, the first color of the new day. Around her, the others begin to move. Children crawl from under blankets, their cheeks pink with sleep, blinking through the haze. A man pulls on boots stiff with cold, slaps his chest to wake circulation. then heads for the door to check on the storm's remains. When he opens it, a curtain of white glare floods the room, snow stacked high against the threshold. Wind still whispering but tired now. The man laughs under his breath. Not because it's funny, but because they've won again. The animals stir, stamping softly, shaking frost from their coats. Someone scatters hay. Someone else ladles out the last of the barley stew, now thick as paste but still warm enough to matter. No one speaks loudly. Voices are low, wrapped in the same calm rhythm that carried them through the night. Survival here isn't drama, it's repetition. Check the fire, check the roof, feed the living things, thank the walls for holding. You watch the woman at the hearth, add a small stone to the rekindled flame. She warms her hands, then her face, smiling faintly as the light grows stronger. It touches the beams above, black and glistening with soot, the smoke hole where the sky peeks through like an old friend. Outside, the world is a sheet of white, but inside there is colour again. The red of coals, the gold of straw, the brown of wood worn smooth by generations. In that quiet, you understand the real secret. The Vikings didn't survive winter because they conquered it. They survived because they listened to it, learned its moods, built homes that breathed with it, shared their warmth instead of hoarding it. Every morning after a blizzard was proof that the old house still worked, that patience and design could stand where pride would freeze. The children laugh now. The sound small but bright. Steam rises from the stew. The man at the door turns back inside, brushing snow from his beard, and the woman hands him a wooden cup of something hot. The day will begin again, slow and methodical, in the same rhythm that has kept this household alive for centuries. And as you stand there, half dream, half waking, the longhouse seems to hum around you, the echo of fire returning, the steady breath of the walls, the soft heartbeat of life continuing, quietly undefeated. By the time the pale sun finally drags itself above the horizon, the village feels suspended between two worlds, one made of snow and silence, the other of smoke and warmth. The blizzard has passed, but its memory lingers everywhere in the way people move cautiously, in the roofs heavy with white, in the icicles that hang like glass teeth from the eaves. The longhouse breathes again, slow and steady, its walls steaming faintly where the frost begins to melt. Outside, the wind is quieter now, but it still carries the ghost of the night before. The sound it makes through the gaps of wood and turf is almost like speech, low, ancient, half understood. For the Vikings, that sound was never just weather. It was the voice of the world itself, a reminder that nature was not an enemy but a teacher. Every storm carried a lesson about humility, about patience, about how small human life really was against the great white breath of winter. Inside, the people honor that lesson without ceremony. There are no speeches, no recorded prayers, only habits that have meaning built into them. A bowl of stew left by the hearth for luck. A quiet moment before eating, eyes closed not in worship but in gratitude. Sometimes a small carved piece of wood, a rune or a charm, is hung near the door, not to beg the gods for mercy, but to acknowledge them, to remind everyone that survival is never guaranteed and never owed. The long dark months taught the Norse something that modern comfort often hides, that endurance itself is sacred. To make it through another storm, to keep the children warm, to still find laughter in a house of smoke, that was victory enough to offer to the gods. The sagas speak often of heroes, of blades and voyagers, but most heroism happened here, unseen, in the slow tending of coals and the stubborn refusal to yield to the cold. As the day unfolds, the household repairs what the night has tested. A man climbs to clear snow from the roof so it won't sag. A woman checks the seams of the wall again, pushing moss into a new crack. A child gathers splinters for kindling, humming something that might be a song his grandmother taught him. A tune with no name, only rhythm and memory. This too is ritual. This too is faith. By afternoon, the air inside the longhouse feels warmer, alive again with the small noises of life, wool being spun, Soup stirred, boots thump dry against the wall. Sunlight slips through the smoke hole and lands on the soot-black beams, turning them gold for a moment before fading back to grey. The people pause to watch it, just light on wood, nothing miraculous. Yet for them, it is enough. And when evening comes again, and the snow begins to fall in softer flakes, no one fears it. They simply move through the same quiet dance they have always known, closing shutters, feeding the fire, drawing furs close and trusting the house to do its part. The world outside may freeze, but inside there is a steady heartbeat, a warmth built from craft, from patience, from faith in hands and timber and time. It is then, as the darkness gathers once more, that you understand what the Vikings really built. Not just homes, not just villages, but sanctuaries, small pockets of light in an endless winter, where fire was not a luxury but a promise. You don't notice it right away, the quiet, intelligent design of the longhouse, because it doesn't shout its brilliance, it whispers it, slowly through how it feels. At first you think the warmth is only from the fire, from the wool, from the closeness of bodies, but as you stand there, watching the air shimmer faintly above the coals, you begin to sense a deeper kind of engineering, one learned not in books or blueprints, but through centuries of listening to wind and cold. The Vikings, without ever using the word insulation, had mastered it. The thick turf walls were their secret weapon, layered with roots, grass, and soil that trapped pockets of air like thousands of tiny blankets. The inner timber frame gave strength, the outer earth gave protection. Together they formed a barrier that didn't just block the cold but slowed it, softened it, taught it patience. When heat from the hearth reached those walls, it didn't vanish. It sank in, stored quietly like food in a larder, and then breathed back out through the night. That was the longhouse's great secret. It remembered warmth. The roof, too, played its part. Its heavy turf layer was more than weight. It was stability. Snow that piled on top didn't threaten collapse. It became another layer of insulation. The roof didn't fight the snow. It welcomed it, letting the cold become a shield against itself. Nature in this house was never an opponent. It was an accomplice. Then there was the smoke, that grey living thing that curled lazily above your head. You might think it was a nuisance, but it had its own purpose. The constant drift of smoke helped dry the air, kept insects from the beams, and sealed the wood in a fine layer of soot that preserved it for decades. In summer, when the fires were smaller, the roof beams gleamed like dark glass, proof of 1,000 smoky nights that had turned discomfort into endurance. Air moved in slow, deliberate cycles. The low doorway let in just enough fresh breath from the outside, while the roof vent released the heaviest fumes. Warm air rose from the hearth, brushed the curved underside of the roof, and drifted back down, cooled and filtered. The people who built this place didn't need thermodynamics to know what worked. Their bodies told them. Their homes were experiments that survived. Even the sleeping arrangements made sense in this quiet physics of survival. The raised benches along the walls weren't just convenient. They lifted sleepers away from the coldest layer of air, which always pooled near the floor. Straw, wool, and furs added their own insulation, trapping the heat of breath and skin until dawn. When you slept shoulder to shoulder in that dim warmth, you became part of the system yourself, another moving piece in the house's design. You can almost see the invisible flows now, heat rippling from stone to wall, from breath to blanket, from body to beam. It's not the comfort of a modern furnace, where warmth comes from a button. It's slower, more personal, a warmth that depends on attention. When the storm rises again tomorrow, this same rhythm will play out without thought. Someone will check the seams. Someone will feed the fire. Someone will stir the pot. Every gesture part of the same quiet science, a balance between what you give and what you keep. The longhouse is not a house at all, really. It's a memory of every winter that came before, shaped by the hands of people who learned that you cannot conquer the cold, only negotiate with it. And as you breathe in that smoky, living air, You feel it teaching you something too, that warmth is not about heat alone. It is about harmony, with the fire, with the walls, with each other, and with the endless winter pressing outside. As the new night falls, the rhythm returns, predictable, ancient, and slow. The fire is lowered again to a quiet glow. Stones are tucked under furs, and the hall begins its long descent into sleep. Yet this part of the night feels different. The air has weight now, thick with smoke and warmth, heavy enough that sound itself moves slower. You can hear every breath, every small movement, as if the house were dreaming with its inhabitants. In this stillness you start to understand what night meant to the Vikings. To you it is rest, an ending. To them, it was another kind of voyage. They lived in a world where dreams and spirits shared the same cold air, and the line between the two was as thin as the smoke drifting toward the roof vent. They did not separate the practical from the spiritual. Warmth of the body and warmth of the soul were bound by the same fire. A child near the center of the room whispers softly in his sleep, and a woman, his mother perhaps, reaches out, brushing his forehead with a hand rough from spinning wool. She murmurs a small rhyme, not quite a prayer, but something old enough to carry meaning even without words. It's one of those charms that the sagas mention, passed down in silence from one winter to the next. A sleep spell, carved once on wood, now spoken from memory. It asks for safe passage through the night, for the dreams to be kind, for the storm to forget their names. Around her, the others are already gone to their own private journeys. Some breathe deeply, faces turned to the wall, bodies curled under layers of fur. Some lie still, eyes half open in the firelight, as though waiting to drift into another world. You imagine what they might dream, perhaps of green fields untouched by frost, of ships cutting through calm water, of feasts and sunlight and the smell of salt, but also maybe of the sea monsters and restless spirits their stories warned of, creatures that roamed the edges of sleep, just as winter roamed the edges of life. The Vikings believed that dreams were not simply fragments of the mind, but messages from somewhere else, glimpses of what was hidden, or what might yet come. In sagas and poems, dreams announce deaths, foretell journeys, or carry the voice of a god. And so, when they laid their heads down each night in halls like this, they didn't just seek warmth, they sought guidance. They opened themselves to the strange, flickering conversation between the seen and the unseen. The house itself seems to know this language. The timbers creak softly, almost rhythmically, like a lullaby made of wood and wind. The smoke hole above, that dark square in the roof, now looks like an eye watching over them, a connection to the sky, to whatever realm their gods drifted through in their own endless night. You lie back, feeling the straw shift beneath you. The fur is heavy on your chest, but comforting. You close your eyes and listen. A faint bleat from a sheep, a log sighing in the hearth, the hush of snow brushing the roof. It's all one sound. The sound of the world exhaling after a long, hard day. In this half-sleep, you can almost feel the same dreams reaching for you. The air is warm but carries a faint chill at its edges, reminding you that beyond this cocoon of smoke and breath lies the open dark, vast and indifferent. Yet somehow, that thought isn't frightening, it's humbling. Because you know now that this is what survival feels like. Not victory, not comfort, but peace carved out of danger. The Vikings slept close to one another, not just for warmth, but for reassurance. The heartbeat of others steadying their own, reminding them that they were part of something larger than fear. A hall of bodies breathing together in defiance of the cold. That was their true fireplace. And somewhere, as you drift between waking and dreaming, you realize that the Longhouse isn't a building at all. It's a vessel, a ship of sleepers sailing through the frozen night, guided not by stars but by the dim orange pulse of a fire that refuses to die. Outside, the wind changes direction. The storm moves on, and inside, the last ember glows softly, holding enough warmth to promise another dawn. At first it feels like silence, the kind that lives before sound remembers itself. Then, somewhere in that hush, the longhouse exhales. A beam creaks, straw rustles, a body shifts under a pelt. It is morning again. Not the kind of morning you know, bright and golden, but a slow grey awakening where light seeps through the smoke hole like milk through cloth. The air is cooler now, but not cruel. The heat stored in the walls has done its quiet work through the night. It held the cold back just enough. The room smells of ash and wool, of earth and sleep, and underneath all that, there is the faintest scent of something new, thawing, alive. One woman rises first, as she always does. Her hair is matted with the scent of smoke. Her breath faintly visible in the half-light. She kneels beside the hearth, brushes away the ash with slow, careful hands, and finds what she is searching for, the red heart that never quite died. She cups it in a piece of bark, feeds it a breath of air, then a shred of moss, a flicker, a spark, a whisper of flame. The first light of the day is not from the sun, it's from her hands. The others begin to wake. A child coughs softly. A man stretches, bones cracking like thawing wood. No one speaks at first. There is a sacred quiet to this moment, as though they all know what has just happened. The world has allowed them another morning. They rise from under their furs, hair wild, faces flushed with sleep and warmth. Someone stirs the pot that still hangs over the rekindled fire, scraping yesterday's stew into today's breakfast. The doorway is unbarred, and for the first time in many hours daylight breaks across the floor. It is white and pale and blinding. Outside, the blizzard's fury has been replaced by a landscape of stillness. Snow stacked in soft dunes, glittering under the thin sun. The sea beyond the fields is a sheet of grey steel, unmoving. The world looks new, as if winter itself has been washed clean. Inside, the fire grows, flames licking higher now, painting the beams above with trembling gold. The warmth returns slowly, crawling up legs, thawing fingers. Someone hums, a low tune with no beginning and no end, the kind that seems born from the air itself. The children giggle as their faces warm, chasing the sunbeams across the straw. This is what victory looks like here. Not celebration, not feasting, just motion. A hand feeding fire, a spoon stirring food, a breath that does not frost in front of your face. Every morning after a storm is a triumph of patience over pride, of design over chaos. You watch as the woman who revived the flame sits back on her heels. She smiles faintly, eyes half closed in the light. She doesn't need to say anything. The longhouse has survived. The people have survived. The fire lives. And that is all the prayer the North ever asked for. The day will go on. Chores, mending, feeding, repairing. But right now, this moment belongs to warmth reborn, to smoke climbing lazily through the roof hole, to the small miracle of another dawn caught and held inside human walls. You can feel the rhythm settle back into place, the same rhythm that will carry them through every night until spring. Light, meal, work, storm, sleep, rebirth. A cycle as ancient as the sea outside. The wind still prowls beyond the door, but its edge is dull now. The longhouse hums again, its bones dry, its heart glowing. The fire crackles low, and for a while everyone simply sits near it, not speaking, watching it the way one watches the sun rise. And as you stand there, the warmth finally reaching your skin, you realize this was never a story about cold. It was a story about persistence, about how a little flame tended with care and patience can hold back an entire winter. The longhouse will do this again tomorrow, and the next night, and the next. It will outlast storms, empires, and memory itself, because this quiet rebirth of fire is what kept the world alive, long before there were furnaces or wires or light switches. Here, warmth is not comfort, it's faith, and every dawn it begins again. By the time the sun climbs high enough to touch the tops of the snowdrifts, the longhouse looks almost peaceful, its turf roof steaming faintly, smoke trailing into a sky so pale It could dissolve at any moment. The storm is a memory now, but its work remains carved into every sound, every movement, every quiet breath inside the walls. You stand by the doorway, watching the people go about their morning, and it strikes you how simple it all seems. No grandeur, no spectacle, no words about triumph, just hands repairing tools, a woman mending a cloak, children chasing one another in the slanting light. Yet everything here is built on a kind of invisible courage, a calm, patient defiance that doesn't need to announce itself. The Vikings didn't survive by fighting the cold. They survived by understanding it. Their houses were lessons in humility. Their routines small prayers of practicality. They built warmth from what they had: earth, wood, wool, and willpower. And in doing so they built something greater than shelter. They built continuity, each spark passed down through generations. Each morning fire a quiet inheritance of skill and endurance. You realize then that warmth, in this place, is not just temperature, it's belonging. It's the breath of others sleeping beside you, the crackle of coals that someone kept alive while you dreamed, the soft voice that hums while stirring the pot before dawn. Warmth is care made visible, a thread binding the living to one another against everything that waits outside. In your world, comfort has become easy. Heat comes from switches, food from distant hands, light from glass and wire. But here, in this smoky hall of timber and turf, you feel the older meaning of comfort, the one that still remembers struggle. You see that every small flame was once a miracle, that every hand lifting a stone or patching a wall was part of the same unspoken vow: we will not yield to the cold. Outside, the wind rises again, gentle this time, brushing the snow into long ripples across the fields. The sea glints far away, dark and endless. The longhouse hums behind you, alive, breathing, holding warmth like memory. You take one last look at the doorway, at the low roof crouched against the horizon, at the thin line of smoke marking the place where people still endure, still build, still sleep through the fiercest nights. Evening comes again, and the north prepares for another long night. The light fades over the frozen sea, painting the snow in blue and silver. Smoke rises once more from the low roofs, thin as breath curling upward into the endless sky. Inside those walls, the same old ritual repeats itself. A fire coaxed to life, hands warmed, quiet laughter spilling softly through the dark. The storm will return. It always does. The wind will prowl down from the mountains and test every seam, every hinge, every heart that still beats beneath the sod roofs. And yet every time the answer is the same. The house stands, the people endure. That's what the Vikings built. Not perfection, but resilience. Not comfort, but continuity. Their homes were not monuments. They were living instruments tuned to survival. Their walls singing softly against the wind. Turf, timber, smoke, and patience. A harmony between people and place that modern life too often forgets. You imagine walking away from that longhouse now, snow crunching beneath your boots, the air sharp and clean. Behind you, the orange glow flickers through the smoke hole, and you realize that somewhere inside, someone is still awake, tending the coals, guarding the thin thread of warmth that ties night to morning. That is what humanity has always done. From Viking hearths to city apartments, from caves to high-rise towers, we guard the flame. We build walls not to hide from nature, but to learn how to live beside it. And even when the storms of our own age look different, digital, economic, or emotional, the same ancient rhythm holds true. Gather close, share heat, endure together. You pause on the edge of the snowfield and look back one last time. The wind sweeps past you, cold and clear, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and wool. Somewhere in that sound is a whisper older than language. Keep the fire alive. You pull your cloak tighter, or maybe just your blanket, and smile into the cold, because now you understand. It was never about the fire. It was always about the people who refused to let it die. Long after the storm is gone, the longhouse still stands, half buried in snow, its walls dark with age, its roof pressed low as if in thought. Generations have come and gone beneath that same shape, each one leaving behind traces of hands and smoke, of warmth that refused to fade. The timbers creak differently now, the turf has settled deeper into the earth, yet the soul of the house remains the same, steady, patient, quietly alive. If you listen closely, you can still hear it breathing. The sigh of the walls, the whisper of ashes shifting in the cold hearth, the faint echo of laughter once trapped between the beams. The Vikings who built it are dust now, their names carried away by the sea wind, but the knowledge they shaped, that warmth is born from care, that survival is a shared art, has never left us. It hums in every home where someone lights a candle against the dark. In that sense, nothing has really changed. The tools are different, the walls cleaner, the air easier to breathe, but the story remains the same. The struggle between cold and flame, between night and endurance. We have built towers and cities, yet we are still that same small tribe gathered around the hearth, telling stories while the wind scratches at the door. When you think about it, the fire inside the Viking hall was more than survival. It was a language. Each spark said, "We are still here." Every ember that lasted till morning was proof that the human spirit could outlast the elements. And that promise travelled forward through time, glowing quietly in every generation that followed. So if, one winter night, you find yourself watching your own breath hang in the air, or sitting by a small flame and listening to the wind outside, remember them. Those longhouses crouched under snow, those hands that learned how to hold warmth in a world made of ice. Because their lesson was never just about weather. It was about what it means to keep something alive when everything around you wants to take it away. The cold will always come. The fire will always wait. And we, the keepers of both, will always be the bridge between them. Centuries pass, and the north changes its skin. The old longhouses sink back into the soil they once defied. Their beams rot, their stones scatter, their smoke holes fill with moss. But when you walk the frozen fields where they stood, you can still feel something underfoot, a quiet hum, as if the earth remembers warmth. Archaeologists might call it carbon residue, a mark of habitation, yet if you close your eyes, it feels more like a pulse, the leftover heartbeat of lives lived stubbornly against the cold. Beneath each mound lies the memory of nights like the one you witnessed, a fire smouldering low, a chorus of breathing bodies, a wall standing firm against the storm's teeth. The world has moved far from those simple rooms. We have built engines that burn brighter than any hearth, machines that banish cold with the flick of a switch. But something in us still craves that older warmth, the kind that requires presence, that needs tending, that hums through shared silence. Every modern flame, a candle in a window, a stove's gentle glow, even the blue light of a screen in the dark, is a distant echo of that Viking fire, a signal sent across 1,000 winters. We are still keeping watch. You can imagine them even now, the ghosts of that northern hall sitting together in the amber light, their voices low, their eyes reflecting flame. They look up at the smoke curling toward the roof, and see what we forget too easily, that light only matters because of darkness. That warmth only means something when the cold presses close. The wind rises again across the plains, the sea moans softly against the ice, but somewhere in some house a match strikes, and another small circle of light blooms in defiance. It is the same gesture repeated endlessly, from flint to fire, from ember to electric glow, and through it all runs one quiet truth. Humanity has never truly left that longhouse. We are still gathered by the fire, telling stories to keep the dark at bay, still building warmth out of wood, breath, and hope, still surviving the blizzard together. Night has fallen again over the northern world, but it is not the same night. The storms have softened, the sea lies still, and in the far distance where snow meets sky, a faint glow trembles, not from a hearth this time, but from the memory of one. The longhouse is gone, its roof scattered to the wind, its timbers melted back into soil, Yet in that frozen ground, the warmth endures, invisible but real, like the echo of a heartbeat that refuses to fade. You can almost see it if you close your eyes, the shape of the hall outlined in silence, the air still holding the ghosts of smoke, laughter, and breath. The people who once lived here are long folded into legend, but the rhythm of their lives lingers in the land itself. The earth remembers how it was held, how it was trusted, how it was warmed from within. Somewhere a thin crescent moon rises above the snowfield, catching on the edge of a buried beam. It gleams for a moment, and you could swear it looks like an ember, the very last one from a fire that never truly went out. That's the strange thing about warmth. It doesn't disappear when the flame dies. It moves into the walls, into the air, into the stories told by those who once sat close to it. And now it moves into you. Because when you listen to the quiet, when you sit still long enough to feel the small sounds of your own home, the hum of pipes, the tick of a radiator, the steady rhythm of your breathing, you are hearing the same song the Vikings heard in their longhouse. The song of shelter, the song of defiance against the cold, the promise whispered between every generation that someone, somewhere, will always keep the light alive. You imagine walking away through the snow now, your footsteps crisp and alone. The stars above are sharp and merciless, but they do not frighten you. You carry a little of that fire inside, that human stubbornness that built warmth from nothing but earth, wood, and hope. The wind brushes your face one last time before falling silent. Behind you, the land sleeps again. Ahead of you, the horizon glows faintly, waiting for the next spark to rise. Because the fire was never theirs alone, it was always meant to be passed on. And now, in the hush of this final night, it is yours. There comes a point when even stories fall quiet, when the last spark in the hearth settles into ash and the night presses close once more. Yet in that quiet, you feel something steady beneath the silence, something older than fear. It is not warmth exactly, nor memory. It is the will to begin again. You can see her, the last one awake in the longhouse, sitting near the dim hearth. Her hands hover over the grey coals, not to steal their heat, but to read their future. She knows how the fire speaks, how to listen for the faintest sigh that means there's life left in the heart of the ash. She stirs it gently with a stick, breathes once, and a thread of red answers. The smallest ember, patient and loyal, that's all it takes. One ember, one breath, one act of care. From it comes the next dawn, the next meal, the next safe night. The same act, repeated across centuries, across continents, across every human life that has ever defied the dark. Because the truth is simple and endless. Our species has always been made of firekeepers, not warriors or kings, not builders or explorers, not first, but watchers of flame, hands that protect the fragile line between freezing and surviving, between night and another morning. The Vikings knew this in their bones. That's why they built low and thick, why they slept shoulder to shoulder, why they packed moss in every seam. Not because they loved the struggle, but because they understood the cost of losing light. And you, sitting here in your quiet room, wrapped in electric warmth and steady walls, are part of that same inheritance. Every flickering candle, every kitchen glow, every spark that hums behind a pane of glass, it is the same ancient bargain, written in firelight. Keep this alive, and it will keep you alive too. Outside, winter waits. It always will. It will test your walls, your patience, your courage. But inside, there is still the sound of flame, still the breath that feeds it, still the echo of those who refuse to surrender to the storm. So when the wind howls tonight, don't turn away. Listen. Hear the longhouse breathing inside its drift of snow. Hear the soft crackle that once kept whole families alive through the longest nights in the world. And know that as long as one ember glows anywhere, in the hearth, in the heart, in the human will to begin again, the cold will never win. There is a saying the North never bothered to write down, that warmth is not a gift, it is a task, and so it has always been. Somewhere beyond the centuries, the longhouse still waits beneath a drift of snow, its roof collapsed, its timbers softened into earth. To the eye, it is gone. But beneath that frozen ground, the fire still lingers, not in flame, not in light, but in the memory of touch. Hands passing bowls, bodies huddled close, voices low in the dark. Every winter since, the world has been trying to remember that rhythm, the hum of a radiator, the glow of a window on a lonely road, the quiet laughter around a candle's flame. These are the new forms of the same ancient song. Civilization is nothing more than a long, unbroken attempt to keep the ember alive. If you listen closely, you can hear it. A pulse beneath the noise of modern life, the old warmth whispering through the cracks. Do not let me go. And maybe that is what survival has always meant. Not conquest, not progress, but attention. The courage to kneel in the ash, to breathe gently, to find one small spark and guard it until it grows. The Vikings knew. Every storm taught them that comfort is never owed, that safety is a craft practiced every day. The world is still the same lesson, only colder in different ways. We build new walls, new fires, new faiths, but the work is the same, to keep what is fragile alive. Outside, the wind begins again, carrying snow across empty fields. Inside, somewhere, a single flame flickers, steady, deliberate, unconquered. And if you close your eyes, you still see it the way they once did. A glow beneath the rafters, the faces of those you love turned gently toward it, and the quiet, eternal promise that even in the deepest winter, the ember endures. There are winters that erase the world, winters that swallow the sky and silence the sea, that turn valleys into blank white plains and leave only the sound of the wind speaking in long, hollow sentences. When that happens, the world seems to forget that anything warm ever existed. Yet beneath the snow, somewhere deep under the drifts and frost, warmth endures in secret. It hides not in fire or light, but in memory, the memory of hands that once built, tended, and hoped. Imagine the longhouse now, centuries after the last flame died. The beams are gone, the walls have sunk into the earth, and the hearth is nothing but a faint scar of charcoal in frozen soil. No sound remains, no breath, no laughter. Yet when the sun passes low, and the snow glows faintly blue, the place feels alive still, as if the ground itself remembers being human. The soil here is darkened by centuries of smoke, and that smoke was once a language, the conversation between survival and surrender, written in every wisp that curled through the rafters. It is strange how much the earth remembers. The cold never truly wins. It only waits, and beneath its stillness the old warmth hums quietly, eternal and patient. That is the first lesson the North ever gave us. That warmth is not a state but a struggle, a daily choice to guard what the wind wants to take. Every civilization that came after the Vikings learned some version of that truth. Every home, from a shepherd's hut in the Alps to a tower in a modern city, carries the same idea: protect the flame, whether it is the orange shimmer of a candle or the quiet blue pulse of an electric coil. Each light is a descendant of that same central hearth, the one that glowed in the middle of the Viking longhouse, filling the air with breath and courage. What they built was more than architecture. It was a rhythm, a human heartbeat captured in timber and turf. It said, the night is long, but we are longer. The Vikings did not survive by strength alone. They survived through intimacy, through nearness, through the soft, stubborn warmth of community. Theirs was not comfort as we understand it. It was presence, a body beside another body, a hand over an ember, a story whispered in smoke. Think of how fragile that must have felt. The knowledge that one careless night, one forgotten coal, could mean death. And yet they did it, again and again, winter after winter, until the act itself became sacred. To tend the fire was not a task. It was prayer. You can see it even now in the ruins, in the blackened lines that mark where the hearth once sat, in the cracked stones that still hold traces of soot. The archaeologists who dig there may call it residue, a chemical trace of carbon, but it is more than that. It is a fingerprint of human endurance, pressed deep into the planet. It tells the story of how we learn to turn fear into ritual, to make the impossible bearable through repetition. And somewhere in that lesson you find yourself reflected, because the world has changed. Yes, the longhouse is gone, replaced by cities, by walls of steel and glass, by machines that do our tending for us. But the cold has not gone anywhere. It has only changed its face. It lives now in loneliness, in silence, in the long dark spaces of the human heart. And still the answer is the same. Warmth, patience, light shared between souls. Maybe that is why the image of the hearth still moves us. Not because of nostalgia, but because it speaks to something primal. It reminds us that survival was once a group project. That light only existed because someone stayed awake to guard it. That love itself may have been born beside a fire, where words and warmth were first exchanged in the same breath. Outside, the northern wind begins to move again. The snow dances low over the empty land, soft and restless. It brushes the mound where the longhouse once stood and leaves a faint shimmer behind, like breath escaping from the earth. If you stood there and listened, you might hear it, a slow, deep murmur, almost like a heartbeat. The world remembers warmth. It remembers the stubbornness of those who refuse to give up on it. And so long as one fire still burns anywhere, in a home, in a mind, in a heart that chooses kindness over cold, the Viking spirit endures. So when you face your own winter, whatever shape it takes, when the world feels wide and indifferent and the night stretches endlessly ahead, remember them, the hands that gathered moss to fill the cracks, the woman who woke before dawn to stir the coals back to life, the child who slept pressed between parents, learning the rhythm of their breath and the meaning of their silence. Remember that the same warmth lives in you, because warmth is not a luxury. It is our oldest inheritance. And even now, 1,000 years after the longhouse walls have turned to earth, the ember beneath the snow is still alive, waiting, glowing faintly, whispering the same ancient truth, that the fire never dies. The snow lies deep, an unbroken ocean of white that hides everything. The tools, the footprints, the bones of walls that once breathed. The air is motionless, pale light stretching low across the horizon, where land and sky blur into one continuous silence. Yet beneath that quiet, beneath meters of frost and time, the story still glows faintly. The story of people who refuse to let the world go cold. Close your eyes and the shape returns. You can almost hear the longhouse waking at dusk, the creak of timber, the gentle murmur of human voices layered with the steady bleat of animals kept inside for warmth. Smoke curls through the dark air like a prayer too tired to rise. It was never a grand life, but it was complete. Every movement purposeful, every act connected to survival. They didn't live in opposition to the cold. They lived inside it, shaped by it, learning to bend where the wind demanded rather than break. And when the night stretched longest, those deep polar nights that seemed to last a lifetime, they turned inward. The world shrank to one room, one fire, one rhythm of breathing and whispering and waiting. The storm could howl for days. It made no difference. They would stir the coals, mend a cloak, hum softly to the children, and trust the structure that held them. The longhouse was not just wood and turf. It was faith made solid, belief that if they worked together, if they tended carefully, morning would come again. Centuries have passed since those fires burned, but you can trace their warmth like veins through history. Every home that came after carries their logic in its walls, the balance of thickness and light, the humble geometry of safety. We have traded straw for insulation, stone for steel, but we still build against the same enemy. Cold is eternal, so is the will to resist it. In that sense, the Vikings were not just survivors of winter, they were its translators. They turned the violence of the north into architecture, into ritual, into wisdom that could be handed down quietly through generations. Their warmth was never extravagant. It was disciplined. A hearth that glowed just enough to feed the body without angering the gods of scarcity. A lesson written not in words but in soot and breath. You might think their time is gone, that modern life has no need for these lessons. But listen to the world today, to the loneliness that hums beneath the noise. We still battle coldness. It just wears different faces now. Isolation, forgetfulness, the chill of a heart that stops believing in its own endurance. Against that, their solution remains the same. Draw close, share heat, speak softly, build something that holds. When the wind moves across northern soil, it carries fragments of that philosophy. It whispers over the ruins of halls buried beneath moss and tells the same old story in a new tongue. It says that every fire matters, no matter how small. That warmth, once made, has a way of echoing beyond the life that sparked it. And if you walk there someday, among the frozen mounds where longhouses once stood, you might feel a faint trembling underfoot, not from the earth, but from everything it remembers. The ghosts of walls still holding heat, the ghosts of people who refused to stop tending, because the North never forgot. It only sleeps, keeping the ember safe until someone new comes along to kneel beside it, breathe in, and let it burn again. That is the real inheritance of winter. Not the cold, but the courage that answers it. And as long as that courage exists, in you, in me, in the quiet hearts of those who still build light against the dark, the snow can fall forever, and the world will still be warm. Far beyond the noise of the present, beyond the glass cities and the restless lights that never sleep, there lies a silence that remembers us. The northern plains are endless there, white and blue in the low sun, a place where time folds back on itself. Beneath that frozen crust, the bones of longhouses sleep, the old homes of those who first learned that warmth is not a luxury but a vow. When the archaeologists dig, they find only fragments, a hearth ringed by stone, a thread of charred wood, traces of soot pressed deep into clay. To the untrained eye, it's nothing more than ruin. But if you kneel there long enough, if you place your hand on that ancient soil, you can feel the pulse of the world still passing through it. Faint, deliberate, alive, because heat never fully disappears. It only hides inside matter, waiting for a new heart to recognize it. The Vikings knew this, though they could not explain it. They lived in houses that breathed with them, built of the same earth they walked upon. When the wind screamed, the roof lowered its head. When frost crept in, the walls exhaled their stored warmth. It was an architecture of empathy, not dominance, the kind of design born from listening rather than conquering. They understood that to endure the cold, one must not fight it, but learn its rhythm, find its patience, and then make a small glowing space within it. And so, each night, the same ritual repeated itself. The last awake stirred the coals, folded ash over ember, and whispered a promise to the next dawn. You will find it still alive. That was the covenant, the exchange between human hands and fire, between breath and flame. From that promise came continuity, the thin red thread that connects the first longhouse to every home that has ever followed. Even now, in our world of metal and hum, that same logic endures. Every act of care, lighting a lamp, covering a child with a blanket, brewing a cup of warmth for another, is the same instinct, the same defiance against the cold indifference of the universe. We are not so different from them. Our winters have changed shape, but not purpose. They still test whether we remember how to protect one another. If you could look down from the northern stars, you'd see it clearly, a planet stitched together by small circles of light, campfires, hearths, kitchen windows, glowing phones in lonely rooms, all of them tiny replicas of the same ancient flame, all of them proofs that even now, humanity refuses to surrender to the dark. And perhaps that is why the earth remembers warmth at all, because it was never just about the fire. It was about the hearts that fed it, the eyes that watched over it, the breath that kept it alive through blizzards that would have buried everything else. The Vikings, the settlers, the wanderers, the dreamers, They all tended the same flame in different ways, and each time they did, the world learned once more how to live. So the story does not end in the snow. It goes on, endlessly, in every person who lights something fragile and chooses to believe it will last. The longhouse may be gone, but its spirit lingers in every act of endurance, in every kindness shared against the chill, in every moment we decide that warmth is worth the effort, because the north still breathes, the wind still speaks, and deep beneath the snow, the ember still burns, waiting for us to remember what to do next. Bend close, cup our hands, and help it glow again. The storm is long gone now, but its shadow still hangs in the light. It's the kind of morning where frost shines on every surface, and sound itself feels slow, like the air has thickened from the cold. You stand where the Viking longhouse once rose, and all around you the land seems empty. But it isn't. Beneath your boots, the soil is black and rich with ash, the same ash that once clung to human hands, that once carried warmth from one breath to the next. If you listen closely, you can almost hear them. The crackle of a hearth, somewhere in memory, the low murmur of voices wrapped in fur and smoke, the sound of wool being shaken out, the thud of logs set down, the soft weight of snow sliding from the roof. The past doesn't speak in words here, it speaks in temperature. It whispers in degrees of warmth, in the faint rise of air above a buried hearth. The Vikings knew what most of us have forgotten. That warmth was not just comfort but connection. It tied people to their homes, to their animals, to each other. Every ember in the hall was alive, because someone had guarded it, because someone had believed it was worth guarding. That act, that small, patient devotion, was what separated survival from extinction, and so their architecture became philosophy. Low roofs, thick walls, narrow doors, houses that breathed with their owners, that held the line between the storm and the soul. The longhouse did not fight nature. It conspired with it. It took the cold and taught it to wait outside. It took the darkness and taught it to burn slower. Inside, the people huddled, yes, but they also dreamed. They carved wood and mended nets and whispered stories that outlasted the snow. The cold shaped them, but never claimed them. Centuries later, the same instinct lives on. Every home you've ever entered carries a trace of that same genius. The balance between shelter and surrender, between exposure and protection. Modern walls hum with wires instead of wind, but the principle is unchanged. We build warmth together, or not at all. Perhaps that's why the image of the longhouse still haunts us, because deep down, we understand that the hearth was never about heat. It was about the gathering. It was about the small miracle that happens when people choose to face the dark together. Look around you now. The snow glows faintly pink where the sun touches it, the frozen horizon rippling like silk. There is no smoke, no song, no fire, and yet the ground still feels alive. The heat is gone, but the story remains folded into every grain of earth. A story that says the cold comes for everyone, but warmth belongs to those who share it. And so the wind moves on, gentle now, brushing across the old foundation stones like a hand through hair. It carries a scent that could almost be smoke, or maybe just memory. You realize then that the longhouse never truly vanished. It's here, in every act of care that holds the cold at bay, in the mother stirring soup before dawn, in the friend lighting a candle for someone far away, in the quiet courage of all who refuse to let warmth die. Because as long as someone tends a flame, no matter how small, the storm can never win. And the house beneath the wind, that old patient house, still stands. Snow drifts across the plains in soft, deliberate movements, piling up against the shapes of stones that no longer remember their purpose. The longhouse is gone, its roof melted into the centuries, its walls folded back into the landscape. Only the faint outline remains, a shallow impression where people once lived, breathed, laughed, and slept through nights that would have broken lesser hearts. But the world has a way of remembering what mattered. Beneath the frost, the soil is rich and dark with soot, the residue of thousands of fires that once burned in patience, night after night. And if you press your hand there long enough, the cold will begin to feel less like emptiness and more like a pause, a breath between the last ember and the next. Because warmth, true warmth, was never only about fire, it was about knowledge. The long inheritance of hands teaching other hands how to build, how to seal, how to survive. The Vikings didn't just make shelters, they made lessons out of weather. Their homes were the first textbooks in endurance, written in timber and turf instead of ink. Every wall told a story of compromise, not too tall, not too open, not too proud. Every beam was an equation between strength and wind, and the hearth at the center of it all was their punctuation, the glowing period at the end of each long day. The fire that burned there was simple, but its wisdom was endless. It taught them patience. It taught them gratitude. It taught them that survival was not a single heroic act, but 1,000 quiet ones, keeping moss dry, feeding coals, sharing breath, moving closer without words. The longhouse was not just a shelter from cold, it was a mirror of community itself. Centuries later, we've traded their world for comfort and glass, but our fires are still hungry for meaning. We light them behind screens and in empty rooms, trying to recreate the same feeling those early people knew, the peace that comes when light pushes back the dark by just enough. Every heater, every lamp, every flicker of warmth we create is an echo of that ancient understanding that cold is not the enemy, forgetfulness is. Walk a little farther across the snow, and you'll see where the hearth once stood. The ground there is darker, denser. It has absorbed the memory of flame. Scientists will tell you it's carbon. Nothing more, but you know better. It's the fingerprint of endurance. The world itself was branded by their faith, that heat could be borrowed from one life to the next. Above you, the wind sighs through the valley, like a voice repeating a prayer. The sun lowers, the shadows stretch, and for a moment you imagine the hall rising again, smoke curling from the roof, figures moving in the glow. You see them tending the fire, faces soft with fatigue and hope. You see their breath mixing with the smoke, joining the air you are breathing now. The same air, the same story, the same lesson whispered across centuries of snow, that no one survives the cold alone. That warmth is not kept, it is shared. And as you stand there, the last light of day flickering across the frozen field, you understand what the world has been trying to tell you all along. The fire that built civilization still burns, not in hearths, not in walls, but in the simple human will to protect one another. The longhouse may be gone, but its design is still alive in us. Every time we care, every time we give, every time we reach out our hands into the cold and light, something that was almost lost, we build the same house again. The snow has swallowed the horizon again. It presses down on the world until everything, sky, land, and sea, dissolves into one soft, colorless breath. The north feels empty at first glance, a silence so wide it seems to erase all traces of life. But wait long enough, and the quiet begins to speak. Beneath the frost, beneath the centuries, something still glows. Not a fire you can see, but the memory of warmth itself. The longhouse, that humble fortress of wood and turf, is gone, yet the idea of it endures everywhere warmth is built with care. Every house that shelters, every hand that tends, every quiet moment where light resists the dark, all of it carries the longhouse forward. Civilization didn't grow from conquest. It grew from that single orange heart beating inside the storm. Think of those nights 1,000 years ago. The wind clawing across the plains, snow stacking heavy on the roof. Inside, a family sleeps in one long rhythm of breath, each exhale feeding the air with life. The fire, buried in ash, glows faintly red. A single spark survives the night, because someone made sure it would. That's what endurance looks like. Not victory, not glory, but a small decision repeated endlessly. Keep it alive. When morning comes, the light outside is cold, but the warmth inside has deepened. The house holds it like a secret. The walls have remembered the heat from the night before. They give it back slowly, the way the earth gives back spring after a hard season. The Vikings didn't think in words like efficiency or insulation. They thought in instincts. Theirs was a science of feeling, of listening to the wind's shape and answering it with patience. And maybe that's what the North wanted to teach. That survival is not a war against the elements, but a conversation with them. That comfort is something you build out of trust. The people who lived in those halls didn't expect the world to be kind. They learned to be kind to one another instead. Today we live surrounded by warmth we no longer have to earn. Yet something deep in us still remembers what it felt like to fight for it. Every fireplace, every flickering candle, every kitchen light on a dark evening, all of them are the modern heartbeat of that old longhouse. We still draw close to fire because it reminds us of what we are: fragile, hopeful, capable of creating light where there was none. The Vikings didn't leave monuments of marble or gold. They left a design for living, a way of saying to the world we will not be undone by cold. Their walls were lessons in endurance, their fires lessons in gratitude. And though the timber rotted and the smoke scattered to the wind, their warmth never really left. It hid itself inside us, waiting for the next winter, the next dark night, the next soul brave enough to tend it again. Now the stars are beginning to appear, thin, bright, endless. The cold deepens. The wind moves softly over the land that once held fire, and somewhere, someone lights a flame, cups their hands around it, and breathes. That is all it takes. A single spark. A quiet act of faith repeated across centuries. Because the hearth was never just a place. It was a promise that no matter how long the night, someone will always keep the fire alive. The night has returned, vast and unbroken, spreading like ink across the sky. Snow whispers over the empty fields where the long house once stood, tracing the faint outlines of a vanished home. There is no sound now, only the hush of wind moving through a landscape that remembers. But if you could peel back the layers of earth and time, if you could listen beyond silence itself, you would still hear the faint rhythm of heat, the echo of a world that learned to live beside the cold, not against it. The fire is gone, yet its ghost remains in everything. It lingers in the soil, in the pattern of soot within the grain of buried beams, in the scent of pine resin that has somehow survived 1,000 winters. The North has kept its secrets, but this one it shares with every living thing. Warmth once made never fully dies. It becomes memory. It becomes tradition. It becomes the invisible thread that ties us to every hand that ever fed a flame. Long before the age of stone hearths and chimneys, long before books and cities, people measured their nights not in hours but in embers. Each one was a sun held close, a small defiance against the universe's endless dark. The Vikings understood that. They built low to the earth because they knew the sky could not be trusted, and they sealed their walls not to shut the world out, but to make space for light to exist inside it. And when they gathered each night around that open hearth, smoke drifting upward, voices soft and tired, they weren't just surviving winter, they were defining civilization. The hearth was their map, their compass, their temple. Everything radiated from it: warmth, family, story, belief. In the flicker of flame, they saw the divine made humble, the same power that moves the stars now held in their hands. We still chase that feeling. Every light we kindle, from the glow of a screen to the candle by a bedside, is the same gesture repeated over and over through time. We are still saying the same thing to the darkness. I am here, I remember you, but you will not take me. If you walk through the North in winter, the landscape teaches you what they already knew. Cold is not cruelty. It is invitation, a reminder that life, to mean anything, must be tended. Warmth is not the absence of suffering. It is the miracle that grows out of it. The Vikings didn't endure by luck. They endured because they learned the patience of fire, slow, deliberate, faithful to the end. Look up now. The sky above the frozen land is black glass spattered with stars. Each one burns impossibly far away, yet somehow you can feel its heat. That's what the longhouse did for them. What every act of warmth still does for us. It makes the distant feel close. It turns survival into meaning. And maybe, if the world ever grows cold again, in weather, in spirit, in the quiet chambers of the human heart, all it will take to begin anew is the same ancient motion, a spark struck in darkness, a breath over coals, a small flame rising where there was none before. Because in the end, that is what we are. The fire beneath all things, the warmth that refuses to die. Somewhere beneath the frozen horizon, the wind changes. It moves softly through the ruins of what once was, a hall of laughter, of smoke, of stubborn human breath. The snow drifts differently there, curling around the ghost of walls that still hold their shape in memory. The world has forgotten their names, but not their warmth. You stand in the silence and realize that this faint trace of heat in the air, this echo of survival, is what remains when everything else is gone. Not the timber, not the tools, not the power or the pride. Only the warmth that was shared, the light that was tended. The fire is older than the people who guarded it, and younger than the world that made it possible. It belongs to no one, yet it has lived through everyone. When the Vikings built their longhouses, they weren't just keeping out the cold, they were making a promise that humanity would never surrender to the dark, that even in the longest night, someone would stay awake, hand outstretched, coaxing one more spark from the ashes. And in that promise lies everything we have become. Cities, stories, faiths, all born from one small flame refusing to die. We build homes not because we fear the storm, but because we remember that once, long ago, we conquered it by warmth alone. The snow keeps falling, slow and soundless, covering the field in a white so pure it almost feels kind. Above it, the first star appears, not bright, not loud, just steady. You take one last look at the place where the fire burned, and you understand, it was never only about surviving winter. It was about creating light inside it. And that light, carried from one hearth to another, across centuries and seas, still burns now, in every room, in every story, in every quiet act of care. The longhouse has vanished, but the warmth remains, because the fire once born belongs to everyone. And so long as a single spark still lives in the heart of the world, winter will never truly win.